morning, chefs.
Let's go.
Chefs, how's it going?
Good. Welcome to Top Chef Destination Canada.
Yeah.
If I fail, I don't think I'll be able to go back home.
Welcome to the Eat Your Content podcast. I'm your host, Rich Herrera. This is your place for all things food and pop culture. Thank you for tuning in. Just a reminder to follow me on socials at Rich Herrera, at Eat Your Content, and at Eat Your Content on social media platforms, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, all those. And to follow the podcast, make sure you hit like and subscribe to make sure you know when new episodes drop. Top Chef Season 22 has arrived. So programming reminder for the next, 13, 14 weeks, I'm going to be covering every episode and recapping it, bringing all the good stuff to you. And joining me every week is going to be Chef Savannah Miller. I'm so happy you can join me again for this season of Top Chef Season 22, fresh off of her appearance in Top Chef Season 21. Welcome back to the pod, Chef Savannah Miller. Thanks for joining me again.
Thank you for having me. This season is going to be great, or it's already off to a good start, so I'm excited.
Yeah, it's hard to keep, a show is on for 20 plus seasons. It's you got to think of things to keep it fresh and to keep it lively and to keep people from tuning in. And at first I was a little upset about Canada, like we talked about last week, but after watching this first season, I thought it was great. What were some first impressions? Just a quick couple of first impressions before we dig in.
Yeah, I mean, already I'm loving in this first episode the way that we're able to, I think we're getting a lot of information on the chefs themselves, like their backgrounds. And I think I already feel like some of the people, their cuisine is resonating with me, and I already can kind of connect them to their food, or at least I think so. And I would say the personalities are great. Like everyone is a character, and I feel like a lot of that is the editing, like giving them their time to shine, but this is like a really fun group.
Yeah, me too. I loved the opening segment of them like kissing their loved ones goodbye at the airport. I thought that immediately endears you to these chefs coming in and makes them feel, I don't want to say makes them feel human because they're human, but it humanizes them in a way. They're not just chefs, right? They're real people leaving their family for the next couple of months and going off to Canada to cook on a competition show. So I thought it was really neat to watch them just say goodbye to everyone and starting this adventure of their lives, right? So let's talk real quick about this prize package, because this prize package is insane. Normally it's $250,000 and a feature on Food and Wine magazine and a place at the Food and Wine Classic in Aspen. Great by itself. But now they added to the pot the Delta Sky Miles Diamond Medallion status, which I don't fly all that often, so I'm assuming that's a really huge deal. I don't know. I am the cheapest seat on the flight package status, so that's how I fly. And they get $125,000 to spend on travel, which, man, you're going to be traveling a lot, especially like with you, for instance. You, after leaving Top Chef 21, you're doing a lot of traveling, right? You're doing a lot of collaborations with other Top Chef alumni. How handy would that $125,000 would have been to accomplish that?
If I'm being honest, what I immediately thought was like, wow, I too don't speak flight language, so I'm like, how far is that? How far can they go? But I feel like it's an additional prize, right? So it's great to begin with. But my first thought was, when you're doing all these things post the show, like this first year, I have been lucky enough to be flown most of these places, right? So someone else is, right? I mean, I can't believe that's my life. I'm like so grateful. But my, fiance Justin, he's come with me. And so we've had to buy that ticket. And so last night we were kind of laughing like, hey, that would have been super handy for the last year, if I had won. And then it was like, man, all these trips that he's going on with me, that's taken care of. Again, it's like, once you get that 250, the other stuff is just
that's true.
Additional.
Yeah, I'm talking about the 125 like the 250 doesn't exist.
But they're both nice. You're not going to spend any of that money once, taxes, whatever, it's never as much as you think. So I also was curious, like, are the flight miles really those flight miles? Like, what is the nitty gritty on that? You know what I mean?
Right. Do you get taxed on flight miles? I don't know.
I don't know.
It's interesting. And a new prize this year first time ever. If you win Top Chef season 22, you're going to headline an exclusive dinner at the James Beard House in New York and present at the James Beard Awards. So I heard that, and Top Chef, I think, already has this impression with everyone that this is probably the top tier cooking show that not only chefs respect, but those in the industry, respect the show, respect the judges, the host, and all the chefs that come from it. So being able to have a prize as headlining a dinner at James Beard and hosting the awards just kind of cements that feeling, I think, because I love all these other cooking shows like Chopped and Hell's Kitchen and those kinds of things, but you're not going to see that as a prize for those shows. And I think there's a good reason why. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I feel like the affiliation is positive. I mean, I would think that if you're going to compete on Top Chef, you've either gotten nominated, have won a James Beard, or would like to. And so that circle, I mean, they already kind of cross paths, but like I think they're cementing that, like, I don't know. I think it's a win for both James Beard and Top Chef, if I'm being honest. And I think it's something that, a lot of chefs get to do at some point in their careers, but it's like this debut type scenario where I can just imagine like how good that would feel. You know what I mean? Being like, you just won Top Chef, about to do a dinner at the Beard House. Like, I just think they're really priming it to be this super celebratory like year. You know what I mean? For whoever gets it.
Like a debutante ball, so to speak, your coming out party,
Yeah, I think it's cool.
Yeah, I think it's a great prize and definitely something like all these people, most of these folks are James Beard nominated. So they're not strangers to James Beard, but to have just that public coronation, so to speak, really cements the standard that Top Chef is the gold standard, I think, of cooking competition shows, which is why of all the cooking competition shows, this is the one I really feature episodically every year, or for 3 years, and doing it episodically. I don't do that for any other cooking shows because I love this show so much, and watching the competition and the high level of cooking, even from the very first episode. So let's get right into it. So they're barely 2 steps off the plane, and they're pulling knives out of a knife block. What did you think of that? It was very different from your season, where you kind of had a chance to settle in a little bit. I mean, these folks still have suitcases in their hand. They're like, oh, it's game on.
I think it's a scare tactic, I was immediately like, don't let them get in your heads. Like, I'm watching them kind of get in these cars, and not only are you like, you're drawing this knife, but then you're getting into a car with 2 people, right? Or 3, whatever people you don't really know. And, just that forced interaction of, I'm sure they're all friends at this point, but that initial forced interaction of like, you don't know if you're competing side by side or if you're going against each other yet. And it's a huge mind game. And I love, not to get too ahead, but I love that they kind of did both. But I think just walking right out and getting into that car, it's a lot. You have to think about what you're going to wear, because you're like, you know what I mean? That's I also was like, how do you pick that outfit? You're like, man, I got to be ready at all times, but you're like walking in, you're ready to go. So I thought it was a fun way to start it, but I can't imagine being in that situation.
Yeah, and it being a team challenge right off the bat, and you don't know any of these people other than the road trip from the airport to the set, and then you're forced to cook together, like dialing up the drama already from the very beginning. Normally, that first quickfire challenge, I think, was yours too. It's individual. It's your time to kind of break the ice, get to know the Top Chef kitchen a little bit, and kind of learn like how to manage a clock and all that stuff. And that's hard enough by itself, but now you're cooking with strangers. Like, what would have been your approach to that had that been your first challenge?
Man, I was really watching I'm still getting names down of everybody, but the group that did the apple, and how there was like some back and forth on just like styles of cuisine, right? Like, we're not even talking about this tastes good and this tastes bad. It's just like, hey, I really would plate it that way. And I think that was what resonated with me the most, was that, this is your first impression of like, you're getting your opportunity to learn the kitchen and like get used to being on camera and being recorded and all these things. But also, this is the first bite of food that these people are going to taste of yours. And so, the judges know that it's a group competition. They can take that into account. But I do think it would be difficult to manage the expectations of the food that I'm expected to give you in this first bite, and also trying to like ride the social dynamic of that.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know?
it was really yeah, it was really interesting to watch, and I love the first challenge when all the chefs are walking into the Top Chef kitchen for the first time, wide-eyed, like kids walking into Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. Like,
Yeah.
what was it like for you like the night before, you get to wherever you're getting to stay, and then the night before shooting starts on day one, you walk in, like what's going through your mind? What are these chefs thinking when they're first walking in, do you think?
Man, I feel like I'm honestly trying to I feel like for me, it was a blackout. Like, it was just like, you're it because there's a lot of hurry up and wait, which I think is just normal in any production. But like, if you haven't done that, it can be a little jarring, because, I'm sure for the first 30 minutes before they even walk into that kitchen, they're quiet and they're not allowed to talk. And, you're moving to this mark and now hold on, we're going to move a camera, right? Like, there's so many things like that that happen. And, um, down the road, I found that things like that downtime was a little bit nice because it was a soft moment for me to like have my thoughts and get my stuff together. But that first cook, there's nothing up there yet. It's just there's nothing in your for me. There was just birds. So it's like, oh my God, here we go. And then you walk in and then it's like lights, camera, action, and Tom, Galen, Kristen, they're right there, and it probably is the first time that you're seeing them in person, and like there's so many things that happen, but it was a lot of nerves. And then for me, just like I also rewatched our premiere episode like yesterday, getting ready for this one. And so
Yeah.
it was funny to like watch our faces, knowing now I know all these people so well,
Mhm.
and myself, and just like watching this first episode, our faces were scared. I can tell that we're all like taking it in, but we're trying to not miss a word that Kristen says because they're like immediately the rules are changing. So I think that was probably like similar for these guys. They walk in, there's a lot going on, but in reality, you're really just trying to make sure you're not missing anything that's being said.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about the quickfire challenge. Same rules from last season. You don't get immunity for the quickfire challenge, but you do win immunity if you win the elimination challenge for the next elimination challenge the next week. So this was a really cool, I think, very first elimination challenge to introduce people to Canada.
Yeah.
You had the 5 different regions that have specific cultures, have specific cuisines, have specific climates, and then they brought in chefs kind of known in that region to bring in some of those ingredients. You had, it was great to see Dale McKay and Nicole Gomez back from Top
Yeah.
Chef World All Stars, so that was really cool to see. I saw them walking. I was like, hey, I know those faces. That's really nice. And then they had David Zilber, who's a judge on Top Chef Canada. Didn't know who he was. I had to do some Googling. And then had a couple of other well-known Canadian chefs. And each region had all these specific foods, proteins, produce. Any particular region stick out to you that if you were on the challenge, you thought, man, I'd love to get my hands on some of these ingredients?
To be honest, I mean, I wouldn't have wanted to do anything with lamb.
Mm.
For me, it was more about things. I probably would have gone for more of. I do cook a lot of fish. I probably would have stayed somewhere in that region. But I think overall, none of these are bad choices. Like, they were all so rounded out, and I think they set them up, at least in this first challenge. Like, there's so much to grab from. But for me personally, I probably would have gone more towards let's do salmon or let's do whitefish. That would
Yeah,
have been, yeah.
yeah. So actually, I was jumping ahead. That was the elimination challenge, I think. So
Yeah.
the quick,
It's okay,
sorry.
we're excited.
I know my notes are all scattered. So here's why I'm a little bit scattered this morning. So I cut the cable, so I stream everything. So it doesn't air, it doesn't come on the Peacock streaming service until 6 a.m. the
Yeah.
next day. So I literally just finished watching this like an hour and a half ago.
Yeah.
Just furiously taking notes. So
It's
that's
okay. I
kind of
had
where
to
I'm at.
had to rewatch it. So I guess, to be honest, last night I thought we were set up to watch it at 9, like, because in my mind I just kept it going, but I definitely canceled it, right? Like, I'm not paying for that streaming service when I'm not using it. But we realized it late, and so I was like, don't worry, like, I'll just get this first episode. It wasn't as easy as I thought. Either way, I watched it midnight, and then we watched it again this morning. So
Nice.
I feel like it was nice to I got like my vibe checked last night, and this morning it was more like, okay, let's get serious. Let's take
Yeah,
notes.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I apologize. Jumped ahead to the elimination challenge. Going back to the quickfire. So the quickfire, they had to pick a single ingredient from the pantry, and then they were split into their teams of the car they rode in on. and then they got some additional ingredients from the chefs to kind of round things out. So again, it's a team challenge, and they don't know each other. They're having now to cook together to make a dish for a quickfire. So you're not even really able to represent yourself in that very first quickfire. It's this team challenge thing. So you had the 5 teams. You had purple, yellow, red, green, and blue. So purple was Kat, Henry, and Corwin. Yellow was Caesar, Mimi, and Katiana. Red was Paula, Lana, and Vinny. Green was Tristan, Shuai, and Massimo. We'll talk about Massimo a little later because he was something. And then blue was Anya, Zubar, and Bailey. So they each picked an ingredient, and then they had to join together to make something. A lot of soups, which I think kind of makes sense because you have these ingredients that might not go together. And yet I do the same thing in my house. I find some leftovers and I'm like, okay, I'm going to make a soup or a stew to kind of use it all up. Were you surprised at that it was mostly all soups and stews, or were you like, yeah, that's probably the direction I would have went to?
I feel 50-50 because for me, soup is, I think someone even mentions this, like it takes a long time to build flavor. And I mean, there's a lot of process in that, is like the steps should take a certain amount of time, right? Obviously, you can expedite that process. I just think that it surprised me that everybody leaned in that direction, or, it was pretty heavy in the soup category. But I also believe that when you do have all these mishmash things and you don't know each other's cuisines, what brings us together? Like, I think that it makes sense to be like, you have a version of soup, right? I have a version of soup. We can all agree that we want these textural components, and we're going to put those flavors inside those boxes. Both of those trains of thought make sense to me. I feel like I wouldn't have thought about soup, but I probably would have gone along with it.
Yeah, because you don't want to make enemies on your first day, right?
No.
Although Vinny, I think, almost did. But, shout out to Vinny for standing on his business and saying, look, this is the vision that I think is going to work. We're going to turn an apple into a bowl. And everybody else thought it was kind of gimmicky. Where were you thinking when he was really adamant about that? And the other two chefs were like, let's just do a simple bowl. This isn't, we don't have to go crazy here.
So the first half of watching this, I felt very in line with the ladies, in the sense of like, I never would have done that. But looking at his pedigree and like looking at where he's worked, I don't think that he's going to necessarily do that if it's not going to look good. Like, it's one of those things where it's like, if you're using certain molds or you're doing these techniques, if it doesn't look perfect, and it just looks a little messy, right? Like, I think Danny did a really good job at this. Like, he would have that precision, that knife work, that like he could get away with doing these, kind of like dramatic things, but that's because it visually looked perfect. And B, it has to taste really good, obviously. So I was worried at first because it did seem gimmicky. And I think when that goes wrong, it's because people are using those tricks to hide something. But in reality, I did have a little bit of faith. And then when they opened the apple and Tom's like, oh, or something, like there was a noise someone made, I was worried, good or bad. But I did agree with him. Like, if this works, it's going to work, and we're going to, and maybe it won't win us the whole thing, but it is going to like make us stand out. I remember it, I'm thinking about it now. So I'm glad it worked out, but I definitely wasn't on board until it did.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I'm like, really? That's like 2 steps away from a bread bowl. Are we really doing this gimmicky thing right out of the gate? And is this what you kind of want to be? This is the precedent you're setting for the rest of the challenge, right? So is this what you want to be known for, these gimmicky plating designs? But when Tom said, he scraped the bottom of he scraped the apple and it worked with the soup, I'm like, all right, cool. I don't know what I'm talking about. So good job, Vinny. And he really like stood on it. So, I mean, if we're ever in a team challenge and Vinny's going to be looked at as kind of that, if he has a vision, he might be the leader of that team in future team challenges. We'll see. Yeah. But when he's got his mindset on something, he's going to go for it. So Caesar, Mimi, and Katiana win their team. They had a beautiful looking soup, and they're splitting 15,000. So not a bad day at the office. You're winning $5,000 right off the bat. So, Mimi was funny. She was saying, yeah, you just split from a long-term relationship, and she took all the kitchen supplies. So, Mimi's getting a whole bunch of pots and pans now. So worked out for her.
I know. I loved it. I also I was like, man, I'm really glad they're giving out some cash first thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
incentive.
I think they're going to be giving out cash in a lot of these quick fires. If I remember the promo correctly, it's going to be a lot of cash being handed out. So
Yeah.
good for them. And speaking of some of those human moments that we talked about earlier, Katiana's story was really neat. She was adopted, and then she talked about her brother, the not adopted brother, and I was like, that dude looks familiar. And I paused it, and I was like, he looks like somebody. And so I Googled his name, or I Googled Katiana's brother. I just Googled that phrase. Her brother is Reed Scott from Law and Order. He's an actor. So he's from Law and Order, Venom. He was on the Marvelous Miss Maisel show. Yeah. I was like,
I'm obviously looking at them.
Google it
I love how
now.
I'm searching Katiana's brother.
I know, that's what I Googled. I was like, Katiana Hogg's brother, because I couldn't place his name. It's Reed Scott.
Stop.
Yeah. From the recent seasons of Law and Order. I was like, oh, wow.
Okay, well that's pretty cool. What? Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm like I literally, yeah, favorite show. And how did I SVU, to be fair. But that's insane. I did not pick up on that, but I did like her backstory. It reminds me of, it's obviously there's something with Kristen's backstory that's very similar, and I thought that was a really cool mirror.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought that was neat too. Contrast that with Kat's kind of backstory when they were shopping in Whole Foods. She casually drops Billy Corgan's name. Oh yeah, this reminds me of when I'm shopping for Billy Corgan of the Smashing Pumpkins, and the pressure. And I'm like, really?
Yeah, I literally, well, I laughed too, and I was like, that would be in the first episode. You know what I mean? But it is cool. It's like she definitely gives me like cool girl vibes, and I was like, that this checks out. Like he seems really cool,
Yeah. I was like, all right, name drop that cat, and then Katiana's like, oh yeah, this is my brother. Didn't even say Reed Scott has to make us Google it, and I was like, oh okay. That was pretty funny.
The LA girlies have all the connects.
So let's talk about the elimination challenge that I jumped way too far ahead of. What were some standout things that you were noticing? Well, actually, let's go back. Let's talk about our number one picks, right? So your number one pick, Katiana, how do you think she did in the elimination challenge? Kind of talk me through what you were thinking when you were seeing her cook.
I mean, number one, just seeing the quickfire, I felt really good, and then coming into the elimination challenge, I mean, I still felt great. I think she did good. I mean, I think there was mixed reviews about like her gravy, and I don't know. I thought there were components of her dish that were well received across the board, and then there were just some that were hit or miss. As far as the elimination challenge goes, for me, I don't think that she stood out as one of the top 2 or 3 necessarily, right? But I didn't think it was bad. I thought there were, I mean, I don't want to get too far ahead, but I think I was a little bit surprised. There were a lot of small errors, which again, no judgment from me, right? I'm just as a viewer. There were a lot of small errors across the board, and so I think I categorize her in just like a category of someone who did fine, and I didn't think too much about it.
Yeah, I think she was very much in the middle. I mean, you have 15 chefs, you can hide in the middle for the first few episodes. I mean, I thought she did fine. Didn't, blow me away or anything. But Kat, my number one pick, just crap the bed. I'm like, what are you doing? And it was shocking to me because you're a 2-time top chop champion, which is all about time management. Right.
Yeah.
And working with probably not so great ingredients. Here you're given a literal cornucopia of just some of the best ingredients Canada has to offer. And you're having time management issues. I was upset. I was like mad. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, how are you leaving entire components off your plate and then not cooking them well on top of that? So it did not surprise me that, she was one of the least favorite, but not on the bottom. But I was like, this is very disappointing out of my number one draft pick. Of course, I'm sitting on the couch eating Fritos while I'm watching this thing. So it's just, who am I to say? But I mean, the time management piece of it all really surprised me out of her. I get that when you're going into your first challenge, you're still learning like how to manage your time. Like when you first came on to Top Chef, right? Was that the hardest piece to kind of get under control, is that time management? Because 2 hours goes by quick.
I would say yes. Like you think, I mean, because restaurants just run like that. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you're always like fighting against the clock, or like where is 5 p.m. and like how close are we to being ready for service? But I think it's like totally different when you are in that kitchen for the first time and there's actual timers and there are people running around and there's all these different things happening. And I think you sometimes get caught up and you don't realize what's happening until there's 30 minutes left. I mean, that's literally like happened to me, but I guess the other side of my opinion, I'm trying to be like so understanding because I realize how
Right.
easy these things can happen, right? But I think as far as missing stuff on the plate, like God, I think I would just go in there and I would start like we sometimes would have like little own timers in our head, right? Like I'm looking at this and I'm like, you're not really allowed to, but like there's ways that you can play the game where you're like keeping your own time outside of just hearing it or having to look around and where's my clock, and you really have to just be on it because that stuff can happen to everybody, but like that extra 5 minutes can just save your life. I mean, she is very lucky that they had other dishes they didn't like more, because
Yes.
it gets down to that and it's scary. But I don't know. I mean, even in our first episode, I think Kenny forgot something. And I remember you see a clip of me running to Valentine and I'm like, does that mean we're good? Are we safe? Are we okay? Like, so it's scary. It is really scary to forget something.
Yeah, normally forgetting a key element of your plate is usually an automatic you're going home. But
Yeah.
let's talk about the worst plate of the night, Mimi. Mimi, and again, it was
Mhm.
time. It was time,
Yeah.
and Mimi just, oh man, I mean, that was probably, I think, the worst plate I've seen on Top Chef in recent memory. I mean, it was compared to hospital food. It was compared to boxed potatoes. Her pork was dry and under seasoned because it only brined for 15 minutes. I mean, just a cavalcade of mistakes. Like how much were you cringing watching this happen?
Oh God, I know. Um, it yeah, I feel like if I'm being honest, you can kind of see even in like her interview, like there's a little like she deflates some,
Mm-hmm.
like you can see it and like um I felt terrible watching it. I really am learning so much, Rich, watching like this season now. It's so interesting how different like it is to watch. And like I hated it, but the whole time I feel like it just reminds me of like Ted Lasso, where he's like you have to be a goldfish, right? Like you have to, I
Yep.
don't know if you watch Ted Lasso, but
I love Ted
um
Lasso. I'm watching it
yeah,
now. Yeah.
yeah,
I'm
it's my
rewatching it.
favorite.
Yeah.
I you have to like be like a goldfish, like forget it and like keep moving on. And I don't know Mimi at all, right? Like I don't know what these people are actually like on a daily basis in the kitchen, if this is an off day or whatever, but I'm assuming that if you're here, it's an off day because you made it here to begin with. And I I hope Mimi doesn't like, I hope Mimi doesn't hold that forever. Because it's hard to let go of being the first one that's gone, but it did seem to me like it was just something about getting in your own head and, well, I know this isn't on yet and I need to do this and blah blah, and you start just becoming inefficient in those steps because everything's a mess up here, so how could it not be a mess here?
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
rough to watch.
It was rough because potatoes, man. Once you get past that point of no return, there's no saving it. Like you can't.
You can leave things off. I think that was something that frustrated me because in those first competitions, like I remember being like, no, this is on my plate. Like I wrote, because I put this on the menu. The menu's in front of them at the table. Like I I had these issues all throughout the competition, even in the last episode. Like I think that you just get more comfortable when you get to a point where you're like, I don't care that I committed to this. I don't care that I wrote this on the menu. It's not right. And and they want you to be like in a chef in a real restaurant setting, you wouldn't send out, if you messed up mashed potatoes for service, you would take them off the menu,
Mhm.
or you
Yeah.
wouldn't have time to remake them. You would remove it from the menu and you would sub in something else. I think that it's really hard in these first few like competitions to remember that you can do that.
Yeah. It's like you're committed and you don't know where to pivot. Like your brain isn't thinking in pivot mode. You're just trying to get through it.
Yeah.
And that's where Mimi was, I think. And speaking of leaving things off and kind of working out, Tristan forgot curry, but it ended up
Yeah.
kind of working out for him because I think it was Tom that said, had the curry been on there, it might have overpowered the elements. So
He's like,
what
we'll
did you-
never know. Yeah.
We'll never know. But you know, it worked out. He was safe. But time seemed to be an issue for a lot of chefs in this first challenge, which isn't surprising to me. Again, you're coming into this for the first time. It's your first competition. You got a lot of nerves. You're still learning to maneuver around cameras. Which, by the way, how long did it take for you to pretend like the cameras weren't there anymore?
I'll be honest. I think I've been preparing for this my whole life. I think I would set up like I had a phone when I was in like third grade, Rich. I'll just say that. But so I'll just age myself. But I would set up like a little recording device and I would make ramen noodles, and like speak into like the spatula or something. So I have liked that aspect of it. I think for me it was about getting over like the insecurities of it's one thing if you're like, hi, welcome to blah 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 blah, versus you're seeing me in my most vulnerable, natural, raw element, and I really want this and I'm going to give it everything and I'm sweating and there's profanity. That like difference took me a second, but I think it was pretty natural. I enjoyed that aspect of it. For some people, I realize that it's not and they never get to that point. But it physically just navigating those small spaces, it looked tight, but it probably was much tighter than it even looked.
Yeah. So, the theme of time getting to everybody, Lana had some inconsistent lamb. I mean, we get to the tasting, the tasting table there, and some were overcooked. I think Kristen held hers up and was like, yeah, still raw right here in the middle. And it's just like flopping on the bone. And, you can't be inconsistent with your proteins. I think the number one thing is don't serve raw protein. That's almost a guarantee of going home. Because you don't want to do that. So Lana had some inconsistencies. Tristan missed an element. We talked about Kat already. Poor Mimi. So everybody's just getting their feet wet, trying to make it through. But overall, I think they were very generous with like, oh yeah, I think overall everybody's doing really good. I'm like, no, you had some bad ones. So let's be honest. You had some bad stuff happening.
Yeah, maybe I'm just a little, I don't know, maybe I take it personally, but there's all this stuff where it's like best season yet and all this stuff. And it very well could be, you know what I mean? We're only one episode in, but I was like, man, I feel like our promo was like three episodes or 3 shots of Kristen being like, you guys need to cook, and I'm like, come on. Like, did we walk so they could run? I don't know, but I feel like we were getting, it a little bit harder right off the bat. But with that being said, like there is a difference between, I think, not taking chances and serving boring food, and maybe you're going for it and you're making some mistakes. I don't know if that's really the case here, but they're being pretty nice.
Yeah, I thinking about y'all's promos, I do remember they were scolding you guys a little bit. I think
I feel like we were the bad kids. Yeah, it was like, I'm like, dang it. I don't know. Literally, just like for all the promos so far, I mean, it's like Tom saying, I hate being grumpy. I love having, I want the food to be good all the time, obviously, but, and then I think there's literally one moment in this episode where he's like, this makes me grumpy. I'm like, oh my God.
I think your group had the unenviable task of breaking in a new host, right? So if you're watching, Kristen's great. I love her. But you didn't know how to cook for her, right? I mean, Padma was a known entity. You by 19 seasons, you knew what she liked, what she didn't like. You knew what Tom liked, what Gail likes, what they don't like. So, and people were, I think I was reading some interviews, people were most scared to cook for Padma because she was, super honest about her feedback. So people knew like kind of how to cook for her. And then you guys come in season 21 and you get Kristen, and it's a blank slate. You don't know. You just don't until you do it.
Yeah.
So you guys had that to do versus now.
That's true.
There's one season in and people kind of understand Kristen now to a point in terms of what she likes and doesn't like. So, I mean, that could have been a factor, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. And like, even like, Kristen kind of getting the chops of like, just, I think she said this herself, like it was nice to walk in this season and know exactly what I should be doing all the time, because it's a new job. It's for anybody, it would be a new thing. And maybe in that sense too, there's less of like I don't know, sometimes it felt like she's our mentor now, she's our judge now. Now she's like a contestant that I'm just like vibing with that has won and I'm trying to get all the advice I can from. And now she's like the scariest fashionista in the room. And for me, it was like she did wear a lot of different hats because she's a very complex person. But this season already feels more like she's found her footing. And like in that sense, maybe we are, it's always evolving, but like I love it already. Is all I know. Yeah.
Yeah. She's definitely making it her show now. I think last season it was kind of like, all right, I got big shoes to fill, and I just don't want to fall on my face. But this season, she's really coming into her own, especially with her own kind of spinoff show, Dish with Kish, which last season was really great to watch. And she's doing it again this season, so I'll be watching those. But it's really is her show now, and I think she's getting a lot of universal acclaim for hosting. And just doing a great job. I thought it was a great pick. When I heard she was going to be the new host after Padma left, I was like, perfect. I thought it was either going to be her or like Melissa King or somebody like that, but she was great. Perfect pick.
Yeah.
So before we get to judges table, any other standout scenes that kind of were that you took notes on? Like, yeah, I definitely want to talk about that.
Risotto.
Oh, right. Bailey. What are you doing? Risotto is just known to not be it's a Top Chef death now. Like, what are you doing? Like, what is she thinking?
Yeah. It's like, it's just one of those things where I actually hate that it has become like this whole thing, because it's like watching that. She might make the best risotto ever, right? Like, I don't think that you should or shouldn't do something because of the old wives' tale of Top Chef what once was. But I do believe, being analytical and like just looking at stats, there's one thing, but like I think it was like almost a forced decision. It kind of felt to me like you already don't need to do that because it's frowned upon. But then if you are going to like do it, Tom made another comment like risotto is about the rice. So I do feel like it's like if you were going to do it, there's a time and place where it's like, this is the best dish for me to serve. And I don't care that it has a negative history or people have messed it up. Like, this is the best foot forward for me in this episode, in this competition. And I just didn't feel that. And so I think it was like almost just making it harder for no reason.
Yeah, I mean, at least she picked risotto as an elimination challenge where you have time to get it done. The ones that really the ones that really boggle my mind are the ones that pick it to do for a quick fire or less time challenge. I'm like, all right, dude. But I think people that pick risotto on Top Chef are a lot like Icarus. They fly a little too close to the sun and burn themselves, and it's just I just don't think it's a good idea. It's such a labor intensive dish that you just can't walk away from. And part of time management on Top Chef is you got to do other things while you're cooking one component. You're over here cooking another component. And I think risotto doesn't allow for that. I mean, at least when I've cooked risotto a couple of times in my home kitchen, I let that sit a little too long and it's toast. Like I'm done. So I don't cook risotto a lot in my house, but from what I know, it's labor intensive and you can't divert your attention.
It is. And like, I just think the Top Chef kitchen like humbles everybody.
Yeah.
And it's very much like, I think a lot of people would believe like, I'm going to come in and make risotto on the first episode and it's going to change lives, and like, for better or for worse, like, I think that confidence, like, you have to have a layer of that, but this is what happens sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes this is what happens. Yeah. So
the data doesn't lie.
Yeah. And I'm glad she didn't go home. Like, I would have been bummed. I would have been like, man, this isn't even like an original tale. But I do think that I'm interested to see her in the next episode and like how she takes that.
Yeah. I think Gail said it best. It's not the worst risotto. It's not the best risotto, but it wasn't a good risotto. So I'm like, oh, yikes. That hurts. So for me, I got to spend some time talking about my boy Massimo, or actually your pick, Massimo. But Massimo, big personality, loudest guy in the room, kind of a ham in front of the camera. And for some reason, I don't know why, but for some reason, he reminds me of Kevin from your season.
Yeah, of course. I know why. He's it's because for us, even though Dan was the local, Kevin was the Top Chef the guy who had done it,
Right.
the experienced pro. And like, especially when Kevin's like, yeah, I was a finalist in France. It's immediately like, well, French don't play. You know what I mean? Like, and you were a finalist, like that's insane. And yeah, he's French and he's loud and he's just that guy. And Massimo gave me those vibes even from his picture and his hair and
Yeah, the
but
perfectly coiffed hair, right?
yeah. I think his hair is the character. It's like the 16th contestant, but I think he's silly. One of my favorite moments when he's like, has to be cooked perfectly. This is perfectly like, I love that energy during a service. Like those are the type of like chefs I really enjoy working with. I love being silly. I love being funny and loud and like, I don't know. I can vibe with that, but I don't know. It kind of gave me a little bit of David vibes too.
Yeah, yeah. I think I'm gonna like watching Massimo this season if he lasts a long time. He's my favorite part of your season was watching Manny and Kevin becoming the power bottoms and just watching that dynamic. And I'm feeling a lot of that from Massimo. So he's funny. And then at dinner service, he's like screaming at everybody, and Chris is like, "Whoa, good morning."
Yeah. Oh my God. But yes, chef and everything. I was like, whoo.
Yeah. So loud personality. He's going to be fun to watch. So let's talk about the stew room a little bit. The stew rooms in the last few seasons have gotten more and more elaborate, more and more luxurious. Because how long, on average, in your season, how long are you sitting in the stew room?
Oh, I mean, do you mean like in one episode while you're waiting? I'm like combined hours? Oh no.
No, just like on average on one episode.
Yeah, I would say you are stewing for roughly, I don't know, at least half an hour sometimes. I mean, I would say it depends on how quickly the judges they know their decision, right? I mean, like it is dependent on if they need more time to talk or not. Like, I think sometimes it would be really quick and that could be worrisome. And then sometimes it would take forever and that also is nerve-wracking. But I would say like 30 minutes feels pretty normal to me, but we've definitely had really quick ones and we've had longer ones.
What was the longest stew room that you had on your season?
Oh man. I mean, I do think that we were sitting for at least an hour plus at some points, but to be fair, there's so many like different details about how like production and stuff like that. Right. But I think the longest time that we had to wait for a decision was definitely over an hour. Wow. And there was a lot of go back and forth. And, in our season, that was at the point where we knew that they could do a double elimination. So you're always sitting with that too. It's like, it's not enough just to know that you didn't make the worst dish. Like there were moments when we were like, they could send 2 people home.
Yeah.
Sometimes it felt like it lasted days.
I remember when I recapped season 20, the first Top Chef recaps I've done. I did it with Kenny Gilbert, who was on Top Chef season 7. And we were talking about the stew room. And he's like, man, what's the deal with the stew room? They get cushions and alcohol and wine. His stew room in season 7 looked like it was in the back of a locker room, just like with metal chairs and stuff. And he's like, man, I hated my stew room. It was so uncomfortable. And now these newer seasons, I wish I had that. So yeah, the stew rooms are getting pretty elaborate.
They're really, and they're all like catered to the season. And if you're lucky, maybe you get some like piece of memorabilia that you can take home. So we'll see. Maybe.
Did you?
But
what did you swipe from production?
It would be really. I might have to show you at one point. I'm going to save it though. I'm not going to say anything. It'll just be in the frame, and you'll know. Okay.
Oh, nice. Nice.
But no, I think the stew rooms are nice. I'm glad they're putting more effort into it because it just visually is appealing as a I don't know, someone watching it, but I will not lie. There's something chaotic about making them sit in those fold out metal chairs, behind some screen or whatever that I also loved. Because back in the day too, there was so much drama. So they're sitting on those metal chairs like, no, it was your fault, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I do miss that.
Yeah. Some of the old reality show drama of
here and there.
Who stole my pea puree or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about judges table for a little bit. I kind of want to start at the bottom real quick because I think this was probably the harshest bottom dismissal of a dish of a chef that I've seen in a while.
Yeah.
They're just like, all right, Mimi, Kat, you're on the bottom 2. Mimi, pack your knives and go. Like there was no
Yeah.
questions of, did you mean for this dish to be this way, or what was your thought process? None of the normal questions you've seen on the bottom where they're trying to either justify or rationalize what they did, or just admit to they screwed up and throw themselves on the mercy of the judges. This was just like, Mimi, pack your shit and go. I was like,
I know.
whoa. So
I know.
what was your thoughts on that?
Again, it's big sigh, because it's just like when they do that, I this is why I like the show, because there's a formula in which you can rely on, that you can watch, but in reality, they do what they want. So if they don't feel like they have anything to talk about, they never fill the space with empty noise or things that really just don't help the conversation. They won't waste time on it, which I appreciate as a viewer and as a chef.
Yeah.
I think it's a little gut wrenching. I mean, going up there, and you also don't really know what's going on all the time. So like, you might know that so-and-so is upset about their dish, but you weren't next to them cooking, so you didn't see it. You didn't hear the judges talk about it. You don't know. And it would be hard in that situation as Kat, maybe, to be like, I know I left something off and I'm the only one standing here. And probably a big sigh of relief when it's like, oh, it's not me, right?
Mm-hmm.
But just for them to execute it or expedite that whole thing so quickly, I'm sure it hurt, for Mimi, but immediately I was like, if I was Bailey, I'd be like, all right, live to see another day.
Right. Yeah. So Vinny was the big winner of the Elimination Challenge. He had a confit salmon, which looked great. I thought it was a good looking dish. Any thoughts on Vinny there? I think, he had the apple bowl thought idea, and he didn't win the challenge there for the quickfire, but he did win the Elimination Challenge. Is Vinny an early standout for you? He's your pick too.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is something we talked about, like pedigree versus, whatever, right? I will say, like, he, because of those experiences, and he's really primed for this competition in my eyes. Just watching him be willing to like take that risk, and what he said during the quickfire was like, everyone's making soup. I didn't leave my family and friends behind to come put soup in a bowl.
Right.
And I was a little bit like, at first I was like, well, I would have just put soup in the bowl. Hold on, what's wrong with me? And then it's like, oh, take your ego out of it. Love that mentality.
Yeah.
I love it. I kind of just, I like anybody who's just going to be like, this is what I'm doing. I'm committing to it and I'm owning it. And he seems like the type of guy that would have hopefully not like fought with the judges over that if it didn't turn out well. But I don't know. I think I feel really good about him as my pick, because he's not only able to make these decisions, he is executing them at a really high level where the judges are really enjoying this food. And Tom is really liking his food.
Yeah.
Which is a big thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, at least it didn't make Tom grumpy, like Mimi did. So, condolences to Mimi. I wanted to go back and talk about Kat for just a second. She mentioned she was from Door County, Wisconsin, which, should bring back some memories for you from the fish boil. I'm sure it's got a special place in your heart, but definitely a special scar on your hand. So how's the hand? How's the hand doing?
Oh my God, it's great. Literally, when people ask me that, that's like typically the first thing they want to know if they meet me, which I think is funny, because I'm like, man, I've literally like a month ago burned my neck with hot oil. I'm like, I hurt myself. Not that it's like a competition, right? But like, unfortunately, I burn myself quite often versus ever really cutting myself. And so the fact that people will come into the tempura bar and be like, let me see your cut. I'm always like, wait, which hand was it? But it's totally fine. I was lucky enough that my stitches got taken out the second I got home, and my mom and her husband can do that. And so I was the biggest baby about just getting stitches for the first time. So I was able to like take a shot and like lay down on her couch and they removed them. But yeah, it's doing great. But fish boil, she probably knows Torch is what I immediately thought.
Yeah, her and Torch are first name basis
tight.
there. They're tight. They're bros. So Mimi gets eliminated, but that's not all, because we actually have a Last Chance Kitchen to talk about, which I thought was really unique. And because it's the first episode, the Last Chance Kitchen normally doesn't happen until, 2-3 episodes in. But Mimi goes in the Last Chance Kitchen. She thinks, what's going on? Am I competing with myself? Am I competing with Tom? Which would be frightening if your Last Chance Kitchen first challengers go up against Tom. Oh my God, that'd be crazy.
Just walking in there alone and then him being like, yeah, it's starting now. I'd be like, oh my God, what?
Yeah, exactly. But we get two surprise chefs. I think this is the Suan effect. I think Suan came in your guys' season and was a favorite. The fans loved him for going through the gauntlet and getting into Top Chef that way. And even though it was, I think, I don't want to say impromptu decision, but it was a decision that they had to make because of the first guy just getting kicked off or whatever, and they had to pivot. They thought, well, I think we got something here. So they're making it a regular part of the show, which I love. So I want to talk a little bit about the two new chefs that we get to see. We have Samuel and Ying. I love Ying. I thought her confessional interviews, she's just so precious.
I was going to say, everyone's like, Ying's adorable.
I know. Yeah. I want her. I want to be friends with her. Like she's so funny and just has a great story. And, I hate that she had to go because she just left literally everything off of her plate with her challenge.
Kind of like in line with like the rest of the episode. I felt like I was like, is this a trend?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like let's not know how to manage time and just leave stuff off our plate. That's the challenge for today. Just I don't know, but Ying was great. I hate to see her go. Samuel is going to be a competitor. I mean, the guy was made for TV. He's got a jawline that can cut glass. I mean, this kid is going to be something on this show.
It looks like his photo kind of reminded me of like an IMDb, like a model's. You know what I mean? How they're just like, look straight ahead, like give me Vogue or something. But very serious. And I will say, just to say this, I do like them throwing people in. Like I'm one of those viewers that appreciates this. And the only thing that I worried about immediately was like, people love Sue so much that, to be honest, it started to be like a riot. Like, why do we want more Sue? Why didn't we have Sue from the beginning? And I like these people, but I do think it's interesting. Like they set up this weird dynamic almost with like people watching it. It's like pitting people against each other. Like, why wouldn't Samuel be in from the get-go or blah, blah, blah.
Right. Yeah. Especially with your season, last season, when Sue got in and we're seeing like some of these people that didn't really do well in the first couple of episodes of your season. And like, why wasn't Sue on? Why was he the alternate? Why did he not get picked to be the first to be on the main show? Because he did so well. So I'm kind of hoping the same for Samuel. I hope he makes it through. But the challenge for Last Chance Kitchen was very similar to the Quickfire Challenge. They all picked an ingredient, and then they had to cook with each other's ingredients. And he came out with a perfectly balanced like eggplant dish with the mushrooms and what was that spice? Burberry spice? Burberry? Yeah, something like
Berber,
that.
Yeah.
Never seen that before. Have you ever worked with that before?
Berber is so good. So it's like I want to say, was it West African? I might be wrong on that, but it's essentially like, to me, it gives me like curry vibes, but there's more spice from actual chili and something. We do a lot of like Berber spice nuts, which is like something a chef taught me a long time ago. And I'll take like that recipe and I'll put it in everything. And people are always like, what is that spice? And that's what it is. You would love it probably.
Probably. I mean, I'll eat. Look, my motto is I will eat anything once, maybe twice. Yeah. I will try anything once or twice, and before I say, I don't think that's for me. But I will definitely try that spice for sure because it looked great. I mean, his dish out of the three were perfectly balanced. I think Tom wasn't completely convinced that Mimi had eggplant in her dish. I don't think she did. And she was just kind of like, sure, yeah, I had it in there. And that's part of the game, right? Is you kind of talk your way out of situations, but at some point you got to learn, look, it's Tom, it's Gail. You're not going to talk yourself out of this, right?
It's sometimes it's like, don't give up too early. Like, don't count yourself out. Don't walk up to the table and be like, I have to tell you what I did.
Right.
But you really do have to know. It's like good parents, right? Like you have to know when you can't lie to your parents anymore. Like they know too much, so don't insult them. But I do think it is a fine line between doing that and just showing up, and you got to have your own back until the very end.
Yeah, exactly. But I think part of that was like Mimi trying to like convince him that there was eggplant in it, but there really wasn't. And if Yang, I think, got all her elements on the dish, and I think it would have been Mimi being eliminated and going home again. But she made it through. So hopefully, she can work her way through Last Chance Kitchen. That's especially getting out this early. that's a gauntlet. I mean, you are in for a knife fight for sure.
Well, it's the worst position to be in. I mean, like so not only are you the first person out, but yeah, so you're having to fight through now. There's two people who are just like, hey, I guess I wasn't good enough to be chosen as the first 15. Like, I already have a chip on my shoulder because I'm coming in here
Right.
for your spot, right?
Yep.
Like, so you're beating out those two people. And now you have to climb over the bodies of every single person who has gotten eliminated who wants it just as bad as you do. And like, you're missing you're missing weeks to get back into even the first person they bring in, if they do it in stages. You're missing weeks of vital information that would help
Hmm.
you otherwise, meaning like, you just you learn while you're there. And so when you're doing LCK, like you you are learning different things, but like it's not the same as that valuable competition info. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, yeah, because it's almost like you're in a silo. You're isolated on LCK. You're kind of hearing about the competition after the fact as Tom is describing what happened in that episode, but
Yeah.
you're not cooking with these people throughout the season, so you're not able to see their weaknesses or their strengths to compete against.
True.
You're
Yeah.
you're just doing it, right? So to be and then with LCK's King of the Hill format, you do have to,
Hmm.
like you're saying, climb over those bodies, and the last person that gets in the last chance kitchen could knock out the person that's been running it and won like 8 in a row or whatever, and then is gone because somebody comes in late and beats them. And that's got to be an awful feeling just to get that
And
far in LCK.
you're tired, I mean, like that
Yeah.
was one thing with Sue. Like when we met Sue, I was like, I remember being like, this isn't fair. Like this guy, like, I don't care, he had to go through LCK. Like he gets to just pop in, like we're halfway done. And then, he was like, don't talk to me about fair. And he's like, I just had to go back to back to back to back to back. And now they're throwing me in here, whatever. And it is interesting. Like they're both just very unique in their own ways. But I think that having to fight from the very beginning and being isolated in that way and not having, like, it's already so hard. I think being the first out would either, depending on your personality type, cause you to go into like this deep David Goggins-esque, like, no, I'm talking about, like, no one's gonna mess with
Yeah.
me, like I
Yeah.
help the bear type thing. Or you might spiral a little bit, like, oh, I'm alone, and you're thinking about your mistakes and it's going to be on TV and now I got to go cook again. And oh God, I just think you really have to I hope Mimi harnesses all the good energy,
Yeah.
and Samuel.
Yeah, and Samuel too. So I'm kind of glad you brought up when Sue came into your competition. That brings a question to my mind. Like, what were the first impressions of most everybody when just Sue comes walking in with Kalina? And like,
Yeah.
hi, everybody's like, is this the guy helping you with your luggage? Like, who is this dude? So
Yeah.
kind of walk me through what some of the other chefs were thinking in the main competition.
I will say one of my favorite moments was, saying, who's that nice man helping Kalina with her bags, right? Like, I do believe that we were all, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I will. If I'm wrong, they'll tell me. But I think that at first, it's just kind of annoying. Like, I didn't care who it was. He could be the nicest man on the planet. Like, it's just like you wake up that day and you look around and there's, everyone can sit at the dining room table because there's only 6. I don't remember how many we had left exactly, but let's say it's 6 or 7 or something, right? And we can all fit now and we can do this and blah, blah, blah. And then 2 people come in, and I was really happy to see Kalina. That was like my girl. But now she's got this dude with her. And I think at first it makes you feel like you're not as far along, obviously, as you were. And every week and every competition means so much because you're like, God, I survived. But then here we go, we're 2 back. That didn't feel great, but I would say within literally 24 hours, he was probably one of my favorite people there. He walked in with a Pinehurst belt on. I'm from that area. And so I just remember, like, we joke now, I was like, I annoyed him so much the first day, I bet, because I was like, hi, friend, you golf? Where do you golf? You've been in North Carolina, blah, 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 and he went to Duke, so I live in Durham. It was like, for me, it was that connection. And everybody else loved him as well because he was like quiet, always thinking, super nice, and he wasn't coming into this competition and like he blew us away immediately. His food
Yeah.
was incredible. So I think it was easy to be annoyed, and then it quickly changed to like, oh, this guy deserves to be here. All right.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely won the hearts and minds of the fans because he was a fan favorite for sure. And I interviewed him for my podcast. Great dude. So it was great to see him. So hopefully Samuel kind of gets that same sort of like reception if he makes it through. Hoping for the best for Mimi. She had a rough first episode, but I hope she gets it together and runs the gauntlet of LCK. So we'll see how it goes.
We'll see. Fingers crossed. I wish them. It's one of those weird things. I wish them all the best, but that's not really how it works.
That's right. There can only be one winner. Like Highlander. There can only be one. So I think we did it. I think we covered the episode front to back. Any other standout scenes you want to talk about? But I think we got it.
I feel good. No, I mean this is a really great intro. I'm happy about how much intel I feel like I have on these chefs already.
Yeah, and it's so fun to talk to you. Chef Savannah, thank you so much for coming on. Looking forward to doing this with you every week. Where can people find you on socials, can follow you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at SavvySav, SAVVY.
Yeah, great pictures. Definitely follow her. Looks like she has a ton of fun every day. So, and don't... What's that?
I want you to think.
Yeah,
what I want you guys to think.
Our perfectly curated life, right? So don't forget to like and subscribe on your podcast player of choice. Make sure you follow Eat Your Content and Rich Herrera on socials so you'll know when new episodes drop. If you like the episode, if you like what we're doing, leave a review, 5-star review, leave me a comment. If you don't like it, leave me a comment too. I'm always looking to learn on what I'm doing here. So Chef Savannah, thank you so much. I appreciate your time and we'll see you next week.
Thank you so much.